Nobody's very chatty today.
Yeah.
Oh, there, the sound
Hey,
wasn't
everybody.
working there.
It might have been working and we were just all quiet.
Yep.
No, the sound wasn't working for a moment
Okay.
there for some
Yeah,
unknown
got it.
reason.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Don't see
Jim
Jim
Walton.
Walton. Anybody else? Um,
Everybody else is there.
Yep.
Here's Jim.
There he is.
Hey, Jim. All right. I will call the Finance Committee to order. I see everybody in the meeting at 6:33. Becky, quick question. Is Steve Sullivan joining us at the top, or should we, do you know if he's coming at a certain time? Or?
Let me try to find out.
Okay.
I know he wanted.
If he was here, my inclination was to just deal with that issue first, just because I think it'll be a much shorter conversation than the regional school committee conversation. But if he's not here, that's fine. We can. All right. So while we're waiting on news from Steve, I think we've got sort of three primary goals or objectives for this meeting. One is to discuss a request for a FinCom transfer for the highway department, which Steve is going to speak to us about. We have a very important and timely issue, which is we need to review the latest regional school committee budget that has been voted on and approved by the region, and obviously has implications for our FY25 budget. And Anna Haird is in the Zoom with us, who's our representative on the regional school committee, and I think she can help provide some context and answer some questions that we might have. I will say that I think time is of the essence, and I think it's imperative that we provide some guidance to Anna, I think tonight, about our inclination to either recommend, I mean, obviously voters will ultimately approve a couple of warrant articles related to the regional school budget, but I think it's imperative that we make a recommendation either to approve the budget or not approve the regional budget. And I think Anna needs that feedback from us to bring back to the regional school committee. Becky, I think I saw your hand up for a second there. I think you're muted.
In the back and forth, we didn't give Steve the time of this meeting.
Okay.
So if we go ahead with the region, I'll figure out if he can jump in after that.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to share. Oh, sorry, Becky, before you do that, can you give me sharing privileges?
Oh, yeah.
And I'll share the budget. Susie.
Is there a fire department request on this agenda? I don't see it as highway.
Oh, did I might have, sorry, Becky, it's a fire department transfer request, not highway. I misspoke, right?
Highway requested as well.
Okay.
Highway.
So there is, so Steve, there is some.
And he needs, he's.
The training wages, right?
But he just jumped on, I think.
Okay.
I think he needs help. I think it's over a $7,000 repair, and he was going to explain it, but I will. The fire department was between training and wages and on-call wages. Is that right?
Okay. Right. I think the email I got said it was related to the training wages line being pretty well depleted. All right, so I see Steve has joined. Should we tackle his issue? So I don't think I was fully aware. So Steve, if you want to unmute yourself in there. So can you tell us, are you making a request for a FinCom transfer tonight? Is that the plan?
Yes,
Okay,
that's the plan. Yes, right.
okay. So you want to give us the details?
Yeah, I think I attached the repair estimate to the email, but we have a three-legged grader right now, and we'd like to put the tire back on it again and start grading the roads, but my repair budget isn't gonna be able to handle that. It's it's crazy how
Okay.
much stuff is costing now. I was looking at the figures, there's all kinds of little things that are between $500 and $1,000 that we've done. And the biggest repair we've had this year was $4,000 on the 1 ton. But it's all little stuff that's super expensive now.
Mhm.
And the
All
grader
right,
is
so
7,100 and something dollars.
okay. And what is your repair line at right now?
I believe that there's 9,000 left in it. 9,300.
All right. And so what is your, I guess, maybe I'll ask the question this way. What is your expectation about what that line is going to, what's going to be needed for that line for this current fiscal year that we're in?
For FY24,
Correct.
I would say just the addition of these grader repair, and
Mhm.
because we're into mid-March now. So I think that would be sufficient to get us through. And I'm hoping that
Okay.
with the equipment, the highway, I think it's not highway expenses, it's highway materials that I will pay for the street sweeping. And I also we need greater blades, and we need blades for the loader also. But I should be able to get those out of the materials budget.
Okay.
So
'Cause
Steve,
All right. Go ahead, Becky.
so you actually, with the $9,000, you have enough to cover the current repair of 7,000, but it'll only leave you about $1,500 or $1,800
That's correct.
for 3 months. And that's your concern.
Yes.
Okay. Let me open it up to the rest of the committee to see what questions this raises for anybody. Bob,
You're muted, Bob.
you're muted, Bob.
Oh, thanks. Steve, hi, just wanted to follow up on what Becky raised. You said you had 9,000, it's gonna cost 7821, that's 8,000, leaving 1,000, and you said you didn't anticipate any more expenses. So what are you asking for, you think you need to get through the rest of the year just to pad that account?
So I'm asking for the 7,000 for the grader, and that will get me through, because the Sterling single axle, that needs a little bit of work too. We've got that in the shop, but we haven't touched it because we've been working on the road for the library. So that's just parked in the shop with the hood up.
Yeah, well, I just want to remind the committee and you that last year when Tim told us that he's going to keep the Sterling that we were replacing with a new vehicle.
This is the other one. This is the single axle. We've been
Okay.
using that. We've been using the 10-wheeler every day.
Oh, yeah. So that's getting maintained too, though. Is that eating up some of your budget?
No, not at this point.
Okay. That was
We
my.
did spend We did spend $1,800 on it to get it ready for winter, but we haven't done anything else to it.
Right, well, again, I just wanted to repeat that when Tim asked for a new truck and I think the committee recommended that he get the new truck, he then announced that he was gonna keep the old truck, which was a concern of mine because it's just another vehicle that has to be maintained and every vehicle requires repairs, even if it's not used, particularly if it's not used very often. So I just want to repeat that. But you think you need the whole 78 or $8,000 to get through the year? Because,
72,
pardon me,
7,200 is the number I heard.
I think I heard 7821. Didn't what?
No, it's 7139 or something.
Okay,
It's the-
all right. So you want 7139? That's what you're asking for.
That's what I'm asking for,
Okay,
but I'll take anything.
okay, that's good to know. Thanks.
All right, Jim,
Yes,
Anyone?
Steve, what's the 7139 paying for exactly on the grader?
It's $5,100 for the hub and the spindle, which I was calling the axle. And in that email, I mentioned that in 2011, this particular spindle was replaced, and in 2016 we replaced the other side on the front. And in 2016, the part was $1,100, and now it's $5,100
Uh,
for the same part.
Yeah, yeah. Inflation,
Yeah. They were
For the
probably cast at the same time too.
yeah, probably.
Susie,
I feel like we could go ahead and vote to appropriate 7,139 and give the maintenance line enough to get through the last 3 months. So I would be in favor of voting this out of our FinCom reserve.
okay, and April,
And I just wanted to sort of give on the other hand, if we had this come out of the current maintenance fund, how much do you think that you would run over? You know, you've got 9,000, this is 7,200. How far do you think that $1,800 will take you?
Maybe one more repair.
Okay,
Because the truck that's down now that's sitting in the garage, it was 900 and something dollars to repair a ground wire that was behind the dash, and it was $350 to tow it. So it doesn't take much anymore for something to go well over the $1,500 mark.
so if you were to start to go over, you know, if you have the $1,800, you could come back to us at that point and ask for an appropriation. I mean, it
yeah,
seems like either way.
I'll do it whatever way works.
Yeah.
George,
Well, I like the way April's thinking. I mean, do we need to cover all of it right now? Because we don't know what the repairs are going to be. It sounds like we have another truck. I'm thinking maybe 5,000 or 4,000. And then if, Steve, you have other repairs coming down the line, we're here until June. And also, if we get to the end of the year and we find that line's coming a little lighter, we might be able to do the inter-account transfer at the end of the year. Because I'm just thinking about how much pressure was on the FinCom reserve last year. I'd like to take, I just want to be careful about how much we take.
thanks, George. Becky,
I just want to remind the FinCom that when we had a situation where department head did not keep the FinCom clued in as they went along, we ended up with a very frustrated department head who just charged a whole bunch before he left. I think I'm hoping the FinCom wants to, foster good communication and also be respectful of their time when they put in all the work to get the emails, to give you their viewpoint and to, you know, it might be manageable to come back, but at the same point, it's another thing that he'll have to put on his plate in the busiest season of the year.
Bob, you're muted.
I just want to say, I agree with George. I think would be a decent compromise to give Steve some more money. But, there's another issue, which I think George might have referred to, which is we got into a jam last year with our account was running out of funds. We have another person coming tonight, Lenny, to ask for funds. And we don't know what we're going to run into in terms of requests for reserves. So I think the prudential and way to deal with this is to try to be careful with that money. And if Steve can come to us for more, as it's been pointed out. And I thought the busiest time of the year was the winter. I didn't think it was the spring, but I don't know, all times of year are busy, but I think Steve can come up to a meeting and just put his hand out. We can deal with it if we have the money.
That's what he's doing.
All right, Jim Walton.
Yeah, I guess for the most part, I'm in agreement with April, with what April put out there. I know, Steve, when April asked you the question, you said you had enough money for one more repair. I guess my question would be, based on what you know right now, what do you think you need to do to get you through the end of this fiscal year beyond one repair?
I'm
Not
not,
putting you on the spot. This is not cast in stone. Just what's your rough idea? We've got what, 3 months? 3 months to go. You've got enough money beyond this one repair to do one more repair. What's your best guess?
my hope is that we don't have to repair anything else.
Yeah,
But I honestly couldn't say, because every single little repair seems to cost between $500 and $1,200 now.
yeah. And I think that's something we as the finance committee need to make sure we keep in mind is just inflation is not just going to affect the highway department. It's going to have some impact on probably a number of different departments. So I guess what I would suggest is we hang in there for now. I think it's really good that Steve's come to us now to give us, to wave a flag, but it's not clear to me what amount or if any is needed to get us through this fiscal year, in addition to what's currently in the budget.
So
Okay, Susie.
I think our FinCom reserve balance is 59K. Is that right? George, do you have it?
I do. Hold on one second. Let me pull it up.
Thanks, George.
Yep, it's 59,095.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to my.
If we did the whole 7,139, it would go down to 52,000.
Yeah.
51,955.
So I'm in favor of that.
Okay,
I have one other thing.
sure, George.
I was gonna put up my hand, but I just wanted to point out, I'm looking at the budget for this,
Mhm.
that for FY25 for the highway department, which I just lost because hold on 1 second. It looks like actual spent on maintenance in fiscal 23 was $38,000, 37,996. And Steve, you requested 28,000 for it was 28,000 for FY24, and you didn't increase it for 25. But with inflation and everything I'm hearing, again, we spent 10,000 more in fiscal 23 than we're spending this year. Do you know what that additional amount was, Steve? And do you still think that 28,000?
Well, there was $7,000 spent on that diamond mower, but that $7,000 has taken care of the issue. It was a computer issue with the manufacturer. So now we've got that all taken care of. And then there was the $5,500 we threw at the John Deere tractor, which still doesn't work and is still parked out back. That was where that extra money went.
And do you think we're okay with 28,000 for next fiscal year?
Probably not.
Doesn't seem like it.
Probably not, but I understand things were tight and I did bump up the line striping and I bumped up the materials. So I don't really, I mean, sure, I'd love to bump them all up, but I don't want to do that. I'm happy to come back and knock on your door with the repair one like this. This is okay with me.
Becky?
So when Steve has this repaired before March 31st, they will have 7% of their budget left for 25% of the year.
All right, I think we've had a fair amount of discussion about this, so maybe I'll entertain a motion if anybody's inclined to make one, and then we'll take it from there. All right, Bob, I think you were the first hand. Beat Susie by a hair there. All right, go ahead. Oh, you're muted, Bob.
The right Robert's Rules of Order way to do this is, but I'd like to make a motion that we provide $4,000 to Steve for this at this time. I don't know if that's the right way to do it, Susie, or not, but that's what I'd like to suggest. So I'll make that motion.
Okay. All right, so is there a second?
Second.
All right, Jim Hemingway seconds. Okay, any other discussion about the motion on the floor, which is to transfer $4,000 from our FinCom reserves to the highway department for these repairs? Okay, seeing no hands, let's vote, and George, if you can kick us off.
Arvanitis, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, nay.
Stein, aye.
No, Walton, no.
Okay, so
5-2.
motion passes 5-2.
Mhm.
So Steve, I think the takeaway here is we're gonna boost that line up by $4,000. You've done, I think, an important thing, which is sort of first and foremost flag our attention to the fact that this line is going to be strained in this fiscal year, and there's a decent chance the $4,000 may not be enough to cover us for the remainder of the year. So, I encourage you to come back to us if that turns out to be the case, and we can discuss. We'll see where we're at in terms of our reserve funds, and we could potentially discuss another transfer at that point. Any questions for us, Steve?
No, that sounds good. I don't mind, like I said, I don't mind coming and knocking on the door when
Okay,
I need to.
all right. Well, thanks for joining us then, and
And thank you for
Becky,
all
I
your,
assume there'll be.
I was just saying,
thanks
thank
for
you for all
everything.
your work. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, keep up the good work.
Yes.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, thanks, Steve. Okay. I'm going to shift gears and we'll talk about the regional school budget that was voted on and approved by the school committee this past week. And let me pull that document up. All right. I think I'm going to need to zoom. How's that? Can folks read that well enough?
Yep.
Yeah,
Was there a no? Or yep, I couldn't quite hear.
that's a yes.
Okay, got it. All right, I think to sort of set the stage, what is there to say, right? Like, clearly, we had a four towns meeting at the end of February, and that meeting resulted in a draft budget that was going to, I'll give you the exact number, was going to require cuts of 1,689,000 change. I think it's fair to say there's been a significant amount of the public concern about that and the implications of that. I think coming from families and from educators. So I think this is just my sense of it. The school committee took all that feedback in and decided that that was not going to be consistent with their mission to support the kind of high quality education that our families in all four towns have come to rely on, and that those cuts were going to result in what, 14 positions, I think 14 FTEs being cut from the budget, if I remember the number correctly. So they essentially asked the superintendent to produce a new draft of the budget, which restored, I think, the student-facing cuts. So those 14 positions. That produced a new budget, which we're looking at on the screen here, which reduced the amount of cuts required down to $747,896. Now, that I think what's happened there from that point is that, you know, we get an amount of assessment required, which is $23,672,918. And what Doug has proposed is essentially a guardrail at 8.2%, which we all hit, and that kind of gets us to the budget that the regional school committee has basically asked him to produce. A little bit of a, if just my personal view is a kind of a little bit of a backwards kind of strategy to get to the budget number that the regional school committee feels like is what the district needs. But nevertheless, what that means for us is two things. We're looking at an assessment that is $1,688,432. Yeah, that is $88,627 more than the last budget draft that we looked at that second Four Towns meeting. And so we went from what, a
31.
39.
2.52% increase in our assessment over FY24 to, you know, the 8.2% that all four towns are looking at in this budget. So okay, so I think that's kind of the background. Anna, I know you're in the meeting. Is there anything else that you think, just to kind of kick off this discussion, that is important to relay at this point?
So one additional piece of information is that we also cut some capital expenditures from the high school budget that, you know, one could argue that they're essential, but they're not quite as essential as the safety items. So like the security door and some of the fencing, the HVAC things that are the filter system. Those really can't wait, but the paving of the parking lot and some upkeep on the sidewalks and things like that, bleachers, I guess, and some lights in the theater were taken out of the budget for next year and pushed down the road a little bit in order to recoup some of the costs. And so that, you know, the allocations to the regional school budget will go up considerably, but that will be minorly balanced. I can only say slightly balanced against the capital in budget. So at the end of the day, we're cutting $1 million about out of the total budget.
$1 million on the capital projects that were initially.
No,
No, you're saying, yeah, I gotcha.
about 300,
Okay.
250, 300, yeah, 250.
Oh, I see.
So that the total of the cuts is about $1 million between the cuts from the regional school budget and the
see what you're
capital budget. They total about $1 million.
I see. So
So-
this figure here that I'm highlighting, plus those cuts in the capital plan for FY25 amount to about $1 million.
Correct.
I see. Okay, got it. Okay,
Slightly appeases the, or slightly
okay,
ameliorates the ask.
all right. Okay. So and Jim Walton, I see your hand up, so I'm gonna turn it over to questions and comments just in a second. But I guess I'll just say, in addition, so really there are two implications for us, right? One is we're looking at a significantly increased budget that we're gonna have to fund if it's passed. And second, we're looking at an implementation of guardrails that's different from anything we've discussed with the region up until this point. Those are both kind of important issues that we're gonna have to provide some feedback about. Okay, so I will now open the door to questions and comments. So I'll start with Jim Walton and then I'll go to April.
Yeah, AJ, thanks. And I know you touched on this a little bit, AJ, but I'm just trying to understand a little bit better. I think we all, during our first couple of meetings, the 4 town meetings, we had some guidance for aiming for a specific budget proposal, and now there's a different number. What exactly transpired between the two that gives us this request for this new guidance on an increased budget?
Well, I think I'll ask Anna in a second, but I think one thing to keep I think there's been a tremendous amount of public reaction to the proposed budget that would have required 14 staff positions to be eliminated from the operating budget. Just to give you, I think it was about an hour's worth. Anna, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was about an hour's worth of public comment just at last Tuesday's meeting, and I'm sure there was it 2? Is that what you're saying, April? Okay, so maybe more like 2 hours. So yeah, Anna, I don't know what else you'd want to offer in terms of like why we're shifting from a budget proposal that we saw in February and the one that's here.
Yeah, so the February budget was not specific. It just said we would need to cut $1.7 million out of the budget. And we knew that that was going to be rough, but then the reality of what those cuts meant were just unacceptable. They would severely impact our ability to serve the students as we want to serve them. And then, you could, sort of piecemeal it together and say, well, if you somewhere in between, could we land somewhere in between? But then you have to go back and renegotiate, figure out like, oh, well, which student facing positions are more important and which student facing positions are less important. And so we really wanted to not do that. And so we came to the decision of just, let's reinstate all of the student facing positions and realize that, the other cuts are a little bit problematic as well, but let's at least not affect the ones that are more directly facing the students. And one could argue that we should put all of the cuts back, and get a level services budget out there, but we have to be a little bit realistic at the same time. And so this is our decision.
Okay, well, thanks. That helps provide some flavor, the flavor for what's driving this process. I think when we did meet with the superintendent and whatnot, I thought they did know that they were going to have to cut a certain number of positions sort of in this area, but maybe they weren't specific at that time, and maybe they went out in the public as far as providing information publicly regarding the specifics.
That's
So thanks for all of that background.
And I apologize for not having a camera. My camera is just broken.
No
No.
worries. I've got a few hands up, but I was wondering actually, before I go to them, could you just speak to, there was a lot of comment in particular about a proposal to change the language program at the middle school that I think was
Yes.
necessitated by these cuts required.
So one of
Could you-
the
could
so
you
one of
explain that?
one of the cuts proposed was to the world languages program. And what they proposed to do was, it was actually like the language program is already relatively small. And so when you cut some of it, it only reduces it by a portion of an FTE. But what they effectively wanted to do was, right now you have a semester of languages in 7th grade and a full year in 8th grade. And what they wanted to do was to cut basically a semester out of 8th grade and then switch the language program to both 7th and 8th grade, instead of meeting one semester, meeting every other day. And there
Okay.
was a considerable amount of pushback from the language program saying that the every other day effectively means 2 days a week. And it's really hard for both the teachers and the students, and it reduces learning by more than half.
Got it. So even if every other day meant half the amount of learning time, we would basically have effectively had middle school students go from getting a year and a half of language instruction to less than 1 year of language instruction. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
definitely less than a year. And then the other
Mhm.
problem is, so they then treat it as more of an exploratory course instead of a learning languages course. So let's just expose the students to this language so they can see if they like it. And then they would effectively have to start over in high school, starting with the first year program. So if you took French in middle school, you would then still start with French 1 in high school.
Mhm. Got it. Okay, thanks. April?
Well, I have to say, I do appreciate the attempt to not take away from actual face-to-face teaching. You know, that certainly is a struggle. What I had a question about was the assessment method. It was like calculus. I really don't understand. It's almost like it was worked backwards to get you had the numbers and then worked backwards and created an assessment method. It did not make sense to me.
Yeah.
The new assessment method.
If I
Yeah.
may,
Yeah, go ahead, George. You want to respond to that?
yeah, if you look at the first blue column, April, basically what they're doing is they're saying they need to raise 24,420, and they're going to use the current assessment method that we always use. And so that's what they did. And that's why Shutesbury is much lower than Leverett, for instance, because that's how it's been coming out. Then they just changed the guardrail from 4 to 8.2. And so when you look at the right-hand column, it's only because of the guardrail that those numbers look that way.
Are you
But they're-
sure? Because there's, you know, in the material that we got, we had a summary of an assessment method that I was trying to understand. That was different than the one that we had agreed on.
Five-year
It's
rolling
different.
average.
Yeah. No, it's only different in that it applies an 8.2% guardrail as opposed to a 4% guardrail. But I will say one thing though that I think is important, which is that the way this chart is constructed, this figure that George referred to, this is a true level services budget, right? Without any cuts at all. So in a world where 4 towns funded a level services budget, it would result in this collective assessment, and you would see the percentage increases over FY24 that all the towns would have experienced. And so they basically did, you're right to say that they did work backwards, because they said, well, let's look at a budget that includes cuts, but let's make sure that those cuts don't include any student-facing positions. So in that scenario, the amount of cuts required is this $748,000. And so that arrives at a new amount of assessment required. And then they did work backwards. I think it's fair to say that, right? From that number, and said, okay, well, what would be the guardrail value that we could apply to all 4 towns that would land us at that total budget? And so I think, while technically true that the assessment method is not different other than guardrails, the guardrail value, it is, I think, fair to say that the way of implementing the assessment method here and arriving at this assessment method is different than what they've done in the past. Becky, is your hand up to respond to that specifically? Yeah. You're muted.
If you take FY24, if you take Shutesbury's budget and multiply it by 1.082, you get 1,688,432. The same if you take Leverett's FY24 budget and multiply it by 8.2, 1.082, you get 1,667,349.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they described it, but this is not anything like the assessment we had been using that's represented in the first column.
Right.
Yeah, I think here's the way I was sort of thinking about it. And then I'm sorry, I know I'm talking a lot and I see some hands up, but I'll just say, this way that this assessment is being apportioned to the 4 different communities, all of these represent a deviation from modified statutory, right? Which has been kind of our focus for a while now, and is, I think it's fair to say, has been the kind of agreed upon method after a long sort of process, right? All 4 towns have agreed that that's ultimately the fair and right, modified stature is a kind of fair and right way to determine these assessments. These all represent deviations from that for all four towns. And so I think in that sense, we're not utilizing the assessment method that we have, I think, supported and we've agreed upon in the past. I don't, when we talked about guardrails last 2 years, I don't think we ever envisioned a scenario where guardrails would be applied to all 4 communities, and the actual
Guardrails.
amount of guardrail would be determined by the amount of budget we needed to fund, and then work backwards from that number to find out, okay, well, this is the amount of guardrail we should apply to get. So I'm not happy about that.
AJ, this is not guardrails though.
Yeah.
Right.
Becky makes
There's
a
no
really,
guardrails here.
Yeah,
They had voted on an amendment to the assessment system. That was part of the packet that you sent to us.
no, but Becky's point is really
Yeah.
important,
They threw out.
if
this
I may.
requirement.
Because
Yeah, go ahead.
if you look at the number that they're asking for, they're looking at for an 8.2% increase.
Yeah.
From year to year. They want to raise the 23,672, but they're not calculating everybody's assessment based on the method that we've been using. They're not doing that. What they did was they said, we want to fund 100%, but because of the 8.2 guardrail that we instituted, we can only fund 23,672. That's a dubious method in my mind. The real, and I know AJ, you alluded to it, and I know April also. I agree that the 23,672 should be assessed to all of us based on the assessment method. And that's not being done here. And what those numbers would look like have not been presented to us.
Right. It's not even on the chart. Right. Anywhere. Yeah.
Oh, I agree with you. I think you all made the right call on that.
All right. Let me go to Becky, then Bob,
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
then Anna. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So Bob.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I'm
just,
not done. I'm still gonna,
Oh, sorry. Sorry,
that
George,
was
you had
the
more?
reason I raised my hand.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So I wanted to ask, in regards to the conversations in the region, in the regional school committee about this proposal, was there any conversation regarding how using the method that's on this page right now is going to affect future years beyond FY25? Because when I look at where our numbers are relative to the others, and I think about the 4% guardrail, if we were to implement it next year, there's going to be really weird increases for each of the different towns. And I'm wondering if it's going to be difficult for the region to fund next year's budget, especially, and I hope there was conversation about the $500,000 that's also being used to prop up this budget from the remaining ERISA money. So I was wondering, was there conversation about how this will impact assessments? Did Doug address that for future years beyond 25?
Anna, I didn't hear any at the meetings that I viewed, but can you speak to that?
So the ESSER money is still a thing, yes. And so, yeah, next year, we're not going to have the ESSER funds. We're not going to be able to apply that $500,000 towards the budget. So that's definitely going to be an issue next year. This is also going to affect the base for next year. So next year's base will be this, and the 4% will be on top of this as a guardrail. And yeah, I understand the issue with the guardrails and the method of assessment here. I think there's, as you guys are talking about it, there's two different ways of allocating this money, and one is to use the total budget and raise the guardrail progressively until you hit the budget with the 747,896 in cuts to get there. And this obviously puts a few towns at more of a disadvantage than others, or would have owed probably more than they would have if you do the other assessment. The other way to do it is to treat the new budget with the cuts as the total budget, and then do the allocation based on the total budget without any guardrails at all. And I think there's arguments to be made for either choice. The argument for this method is that no town has a higher increase than 8.2%. And the argument for the other method is that more accurately reflects the assessment method, but it definitely will hit some towns a lot harder than the other towns. And some towns will see, it looks like Pelham will see a probably close, if not even larger than 20% increase if they were to apportion it that way.
Right. Bob.
yeah, I want to say first, just to respond to what Anna just said, it doesn't make any sense. It seems to me they should find out what numbers that they want to have for a total cost, and then apportion the cost according to the statutory method, as that's our method. And then after the statutory method has created the assessments for our particular towns, then you apply the guardrails. So that we still have the right proportion according to the method that we've adopted, and then we modify it to reduce the highest increase. Maybe it would be Pelham, probably usually is, right? But I don't see why they didn't do that first step in any case. That's and also I think we have to remember here, folks, that Amherst has not approved funding this budget yet, the Amherst financial team. So personally, I think that it's very unlikely that they will. So if that means all these numbers go away, and we're going to have to deal with that situation as it evolves, because I don't think it's likely that they can afford to pay for this.
Right.
From what I see.
I think you may be right, Bob, but I guess what I would say is that we have an obligation to independently arrive at a conclusion for us about whether this is something we can recommend to our.
Okay, well, I'll
our
just say my first take is for looking at
citizens.
this tonight and looking at our budget and looking at the stresses we have currently to deal with on our budget without this increase, that it's unlikely we can afford it based upon our situation with our tax levy such as it is now compared. And after all, we represent the taxpayer, and the taxpayer is also undergoing inflationary pressure in his own household, so his or her household. And we have to regard that as an important issue for us too. So that's my take.
Got it. Susie?
This is just an observation, not an argument. It seems to me that this school committee, the regional school committee, decided, from what I read in the paper, decided to make a stand about the programming to be funded for the schools. They came at it from their responsibility of the school committee saying what program is needed. That splits it off, as far as I can see, because it's such a big budget. It splits it off from being responsible for the financing and how you represent the costs to the towns that are going to finance it. That feels a little different to me. The superintendent's office is in the middle of that. They're the sort of arbiters of this. But there's clearly a decision that this is the programming that's needed, and it was made by the school committee. And now our job is to say, what is the financing? What is the role of the financing? And I feel it's unequivocal that Shutesbury can't afford this kind of jump. It is way beyond us. We were busy wrestling the numbers into something that was going to take more than our 2.5 levy, more than our new growth, more than this and that. And this is just way, way out there. So if the decision about this budget gets split into program needs versus financing, then I think we just need to represent our financing part, which is we cannot afford this. And I do think Bob's right that Amherst is going to come up with a response, so is Pelham, so is Leverett. And I can't imagine that any town can absorb this kind of hit. In the newspaper, they're talking about, will Amherst College cough $1 million, blah, blah, blah. Those are things that also are not in our purview. All we can say is this is what our tax levy looks like, this is what our revenue looks like, and there is no way that this will fit into our picture. And if we're going to do this sort of separately, where they talk about the programming and we talk about the budget, then we do have to recommend that. I know that when we went to the 4 towns, it was clear that that was way too big a cut, but there's no revenue coming in to this picture. And we can say our town cannot afford that kind of revenue jump.
Okay, George?
Yeah, for me, it's clearly too much money. We've been struggling already trying to control the increase, knowing that this year is one of the most difficult years we've had. That was before we saw these numbers. I would hope that maybe the finance committee, we could take a closer look at the budget, see how things stand, and come up with an additional amount above the 39,000 that we might be able to support. But there's no way in my mind that we could support an additional $89,000. And so I would propose, that we don't approve this, and we do work to see what can we do for the region this year. And that's going to take a little more horsepower, a little time. I will also disclose to everyone that I became aware this afternoon that the town of Pelham did vote on this. The finance committee met and voted, and they actually rejected it as well. So I know you were all speculating about that.
Yeah.
Okay. I hadn't heard that. Okay, great. Jim Walton?
Yeah, I think there's maybe there's 3 messages back to the regional district. One is the points that were made earlier about statutory. We should be following the same methodology we followed in the past with regard to changes from year to year. I think, Bob, you referred to this earlier. I think the second comment that needs to be pushed back to the region is and this column, this right blue column is called applying guardrails. These are not guardrails, and guardrails were designed for a specific purpose. This has nothing to do with guardrails. And maybe the third thing is, either reject as we're talking, or we talk about proposing another four-town meeting, a quick four-town meeting where this topic comes up, and go through the budget process as we always do with the region, where the four towns discuss and debate the increase or whatever the budget may be. But if that's not feasible, then yeah, definitely support not going forward with this increase.
Okay, April.
I would like to see another column with using the method that the towns have agreed on. What would that look like? And with the guardrails. I mean, on the other hand, what's hard is that, education is so important and so underfunded, and, we have roads to maintain. This is too much to ask this year.
Mhm.
But I would like to see the numbers using the method that we had agreed on, just to look at that. And George can't do that? You can't do that, George?
Oh,
I think
calculating.
if you look at the first blue column and you see the increases by that sort of implies a methodology there, right? Which to me would indicate that Pelham and Leverett get hammered with increase, and then Amherst and Shutesbury are probably pretty similar with regard to increase.
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally what we would have seen was a third column here, which was using this method, 100% modified statutory, on a budget total that is equal to this number. We're speculating. We have a rough idea of what that would produce, but we don't know the exact.
Well, I wonder if
numbers.
the proportions would be the same, but this formula just gets confusing. You know what I mean? So the 19,706
Yeah.
for Amherst is a percentage. Would that percentage be the same? I don't know.
Right.
I could check though, because we could look back at the previous ones they presented. If the percentages are always the same, we could calculate it that way.
Right.
Give it a go. Not necessarily tonight.
So let me see, Anna.
So the percentages represent the percent increase from last year. So those percentages would not be the same necessarily. I think what you want is to take the allocation percentages. So what percentage of the total budget is each amount. And so if you took like 19.7 divided by 24.4, and then you multiplied that number by 23.672918, then that would give you the amount that Amherst would have owed if you did a strict allocation method to this amount of money. So I think that would be a quick way of doing the calculation if you have
Yeah, it would be rough,
to
but
that.
yeah, it would get us. Yeah. Okay.
Not sure if that's helpful.
Let's see. Yeah, no, that is. Bob?
Yeah, I just want to ask Anna, the school committee is the one that negotiated a contract for the instructors at the school. And that is something that I wonder how much the new contract has impacted this budget. And I couldn't see it from just the paperwork that I had in my front folder here. Do you have that on the top of your head, Anna?
It's a huge impact. That's
Right,
what
so
I
the
would
school-
say. Yeah.
Okay, so that
Yeah.
was what my impression was too.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, salaries make up a huge portion of the budget.
right, so,
And so there are concessions in that budget negotiation, which I will remind you, went on for over a year.
yes, I know that.
So
From my point of view, I tried to raise this issue at the four-town meeting. The enrollment has declined in the regional school over a 10-year period, about 19%. And to me, not knowing all the details of how the school, you organized the classes and the teaching, obviously teaching is the most important thing that the school does. I just wonder whether whether there could be some structural changes applied in the way that the instruction is delivered to the students that reflect the enrollment decreases. I've always, speaking out, I'm against school choice as a way of keeping the current configuration intact. I think that the configuration could be fundamentally changed to make it reflect enrollment and not import choice students who pay us next to nothing to support the cost of that school down there. So anyway, I just wonder, since the school committee did provide, through, I know, a very, very stressful negotiation, a major driver for this increase, maybe there's a way that they should come to understand with a 20% decrease in enrollment, that we do have, it's reasonable to think that we would have less teachers for 20% less students. I mean, I don't know if it fits or if it can be arranged in a way that works, but it seems like reasonable on its face that this sort of adjustment is reasonable and practical.
Bob, over what period of time
10 years.
is that
10 years.
20%? Okay, 10 years. Okay.
Those are the numbers that I got from Doug when I asked him a
Right.
series of questions that the committee forwarded through me to him.
Right. Okay. No, that's helpful, because my understanding is that the census has been fairly stable in the last few years, but that's why I was asking what period of time.
Well, I can send you those.
And I see I remember. And I see your hand is still up. Did you want to respond to anything Bob said? Or?
Yeah. What I would say is that I don't think we've been able to fund a level services budget for many years. So basically what we have been doing is making cuts every year to the system. So all of those cuts are adding up, and those cuts are reducing the teachers, right? So every year we cut a teacher, every year someone retires and we don't replace them. And we've been doing this continuously for several years now. And so what I would say is there has been shrinkage to match the lowering numbers of students. And so we really are running at capacity right now. The numbers of the teacher student ratio is about where you want it to be and not lower than you want it to be. And in some cases higher than you want it to be. So I do think that reducing the number of teachers would negatively impact class sizes. But one of the biggest impacts it's going to have is on special ed. And that's probably and maybe you could argue that we could go back to the superintendent and say that's not the right position to cut. But, then you're going back and, making sort of like micromanagement cuts and saying, look, you need to change this one and you need to change this one and you need to change this one. And at a certain point, you do need to trust the administrators to know which cuts are going to damage the students the least. And, I don't think that any cut is going to make an improvement. All of them are bad. To a certain extent, yes, you're saying what's the least horrible cut that we can make. But what I will say is the argument that we're losing students and therefore we can afford these cuts doesn't totally hold. We've been cutting too many times that we're really at where we can't afford to lose any more teachers to maintain the services that we have.
Yeah. I just want to, I think, say something. Bob, just hang on for 1 second.
Yeah.
Just in response. I think I'm largely in agreement with some of the kind of overall feedback that we've heard during this meeting, but I would push back on sort of one, I think, important point, which is that I think it's accurate and fair to say that we've got a structural problem in that we have families and students that have been benefiting from a quality education that has been underfunded over the last several years. And we've managed to mask that problem by tapping into some forms of funding that were temporary in nature and related to the pandemic. And that enabled us to kind of, get by, over the last few years. But I think we fundamentally have a conflict in terms of, Susie talked about it as programming for the needs of students versus the challenge of funding the budget, and there being a tension between the two. And I think what I would say is that I do think that we're not appropriately funding the regional school at the levels that we expect and require in terms of the experience we expect our students to have. And so I think it sort of created this need to sort of reset the budget, and it's being done in a fairly dramatic way here. But I'm not like, I think it is, I think both things can be true, right? That we can't afford this increase, but we also can't afford to gut the quality of education, and we can't afford the implications of these cuts. And I think where that leaves me is that whatever we do here in this, whether it's for FY25 or if this gets kicked it, down the road to next year, like I do think we have a hard in Shutesbury. I think we have a hard decision to make about how we might need to readjust what services, what levels we're funding various services at. If, as I believe, we may be underfunding our schools, and that may require us to look at ways to save money in other parts of our budget. And then those will be painful decisions to make. But it is a conversation. I'm sort of like increasingly feeling like I don't want to have it, but like I kind of think we need to have it, whether it's this year or next year. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Bob,
Yeah,
then April.
I want to briefly respond to what Anna said. I just want to tell you, I totally sympathize with your dilemma and what you're having to deal with down there at the regional school. But I want to point out to you that the student teacher ratio has actually decreased from about 15.5% in that same 10-year period, just for the record. That includes the school choice students in that ratio whose numbers and percentage have gone up during that period. So it just reinforces my point. It's not that I know exactly what to do about this, but I do think that that it should be understood that student teacher ratio has actually gone from 11.8 to 10.2 over that period. So that's just to be consider that fact. And the other thing is, if we have to think in terms of what you need to do a good job and what sort of resources you need to operate that institution. But the other thing is that we fund this with property taxes, which is a regressive tax, and it falls with the most weight on people who have the least resources, which is another issue. It's nothing to do with what we do here, but it's something we have to remember when we pass along these costs to the taxpayer, that we're disproportionately punishing or affecting people who have the least ability to pay for it. So if we could just get everybody's 1040 on the table and start funding education based upon income and on resources like that, maybe we would have a different situation in terms of our resources to distribute. But we are distributing based on a regressive tax system.
April.
This may sound anyway. I remember a number of years ago, back when we were children, we had an override vote that made our budget more robust and really set the town in a better path. It just occurred to me that maybe this is a time for another override vote for us, for the towns to come together to really acknowledge what we haven't been paying for and to come up with a way that we can pay for it. At the same time, we need to be pushing our legislators, and I think the Amherst College, I think that's a good idea, but I wonder if an override would be a way to address this in a longer term way. I know that's sacrilegious.
Susie?
In the budgets I've been participating in and aware of, we have not always needed all of our 2.5 levy. Therefore, we have some levy capacity. This is something that the people at town meeting have supported. They're going to support that. That's obvious. And so now we need to, it may need to be re-presented. And like April said, one way would say sort of a lump sum. This is the override we need to bring our education budget back in line. But the one thing I've always noticed is that compared to Amherst, Shutesbury puts a bigger percentage in their education budget than their other costs, roads, fire, police. So I don't know if that's another aspect to look at. If everybody was funding their education budget, I mean, both the local and the regional at 66% or something like that we're at, then maybe we would have a different discussion.
Jim Walton?
Yeah, I just responded. I think there was a comment earlier about, well, this 8.2%, it's a big number. It's painful. It might be something we absolutely have to do. And maybe in order to do that, we'd have to cut in other areas to make up the difference. And that's where I have a concern. I mean, education is 60–70% of our budget. The regional school is a big chunk of that. We've also gone through budget reviews for all our other departments. And I think for the most part, we've been in that 2 to 3% increase. So I don't think there's much room for cutting. Now, we just heard from Steve. He's doing everything he can to try to cut in certain places just to keep things even. And I don't think that's too different from what we see in some of the other departments and some of the other areas. So I just don't see how we're going to make up the difference by cutting in other budgets in other areas to get into this 8.2%. It's a huge number, and it's a huge number in one of our biggest budget areas, 8.2%.
Anna?
So I just wanted to point out that you talked about the student teacher ratio decreasing slightly, but the percentage of the students that have an IEP or have the special ed students has actually increased dramatically. And so that is also affecting the student teacher ratio.
I see. George?
In the last 10 years, there have been a number of cuts to this region. We've seen it. We've seen some very big cuts 6–7 years ago. And to some extent, it's related to decreased enrollment, and to other extent, it's not. And when we start cutting programs, we know that it's not. And it is disappointing to be in this position. I know it is for everyone. It certainly is for me as well. But there is the financial reality that Bob was referring to, and that is, Chapter 70 has not lived up to its promise. We all know that. And it is regressive to put too much burden on the taxpayers. Our job as the Finance Committee, I guess, is to try to figure out to what extent can we really put that burden on the taxpayer. And without taxpayer feedback, we might not really know until we get to town meeting. For me, I'm looking at this budget that Becky sent us today, and I'm looking at what its impact is going to be on the average taxpayer. And it looks to me like it's over $300 additional tax increase for the taxpayers for the budget we have. We were already struggling, as I said earlier, before this started. And yeah, we can talk to the legislators till we're blue in the face. It's getting us nowhere. And this is a crisis regionally and probably out east as well. It's well documented in the Gazette. Belchertown last week, Amherst for the last month, East Hampton, Northampton. So that doesn't answer anything for us today, though. So, like I said earlier, I'm willing to help and give something. There's no way I'm going to approve a $128,000 increase. But, maybe it is time to say we use more of that excess levy capacity so that we can fortify our ability to pay the region, because this isn't going away. We're going to be having these same conversations in a year from now. But we need to do the analysis.
Right. So George, just to respond to that, I did a little kind of quick calculation, and if we could absorb a 4% increase in our assessment, that would amount to $62,149 increase. Look, I'm not saying we take any sort of action on this now, but to try to put some kind of number out there as to like what might be doable for the town in terms of an increase that was above and beyond the 39,000 and change that we had seen in the previous budget. I'm wondering what people just, how that strikes them. That would be, so that would be an additional almost $23,000 above and beyond the budget that we looked at the last four towns meeting.
One thing I can tell you is for every the ratio is 1.1. So if we add $40,000, I'm just throwing this out. If we add $40,000 to our budget, that means that the average household is going to pay another $44 on their tax bill. And so we can look at it in terms of to what extent do we want to add to the tax bill for the region, right? Whatever that increase is, we can calculate what the impact on the taxpayers are. And again, I think we want to look at the bottom line where we are with everything else that we've looked at up to now and say, what is that number? And then including the 39,000 that's in there initially from the region. And then, for every 10,000 we're adding about $11 to the tax bill. This 127 is a $90,000 increase. That would be $100 per household increase. Above and beyond what we're already going to be asking people to increase with the budget that we presented, which, by the way, we've used $130,000 of cash to balance. And we're already, again, struggling ourselves. Not as bad as the region. I'm not comparing our dilemma to theirs, but.
All right, Anna.
Sorry, I think I just left my hand up. Sorry, I didn't have
Okay,
anything.
gotcha. All right, Bob.
Yeah, I just want to add to what George just said and say that there's also in this budget that's being presented to us, there's ESSER funds. So there's another thing that will go away, I think, next year. So that will be something that will be in the basis budget that is not funded by the taxpayer now.
Yeah. And one bit of feedback, and I think we will take a formal vote, just so you have. I mean, I think we see where it's going, but just so you can have something concrete to report back to the regional school committee. But one thought that occurred to me is that, if it sounds like Pelham is not recommending this, I think we might be heading in that direction. I don't know what Amherst and Leverett are going to say, but if the feedback is this is not tenable, this 8.2% increase, and the region is and superintendent are looking at sort of alternatives that fall somewhere between the four towns budget and the one we're looking at right here. I think one thing I'd be interested in is what would be the implications of restoring the cuts that are specific to the language program that you spoke to, that did seem to be the focus of certainly not all, but a lot of the public comment that at least I heard and read at town meetings. So if there was another alternative budget that could be drafted and responded to, I would be interested in that. I don't know if other folks are, but that would be kind of one budget scenario that would fall somewhere between these two that we've talked about. Okay, any other sort of general comment? So I think, yeah, Susie.
I feel like we don't really have enough workable information. So like when you say, what about an alternative to do this, that, I guess I feel like this, what's being presented to us is kind of like this or not. And so if it's this or not, I'd say not. I have a lot of concern about our budget, and I also have a concern about being able to compete in the market for students that can go to other places. But they too are facing inflation. But I don't want to put Amherst in a death spiral. So it is, as an alternative, might be looking at any pieces that could be offered, because this doesn't offer pieces. This is just like the whole thing plus some cuts, or not. So I don't know what kind of voting we could do when we don't have that information to make some other decisions yet.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we're in a position to vote on a budget, to approve a budget, but I think we could vote to just reject a budget scenario that we're being presented with here, which again, I'm not like, I mean, I think I just sense that's where the discussion is headed, but and I think that may be useful sort of feedback for that Anna can share back. Let me go to Bob and then Anna.
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't know if it would be acceptable to the committee or to Anna, but I think there's pretty clearly a consensus that this 8.2% is not acceptable to Shutesbury Finance Committee. So would that be adequate to send that message back without a vote? Do we have to have a formal vote?
Anna, what is the region expecting? Are they expecting the towns to kind of formally vote on whether, like the finance committees to vote on whether to approve or not approve or recommend, I should say, this budget? Like, what do you feel like you need from us?
So I think, you obviously have the right to not come back to us with anything, and we have to just wait until town meeting and hear what town meeting decides.
Yeah.
Because it's possible that you could recommend not passing it, and then the town would decide that they want to override your decision and pass it anyway. But I think it would still be helpful to know whether you support the budget or not. One thing that I would say is, if you are inclined to not pass the budget, or recommend the budget at the town meeting, if there's any amount of guidance as to what you could possibly be okay with, I think that would be helpful, because then we could say, if we could get the budget down to X, then
Right.
that would be more likely to pass. And then we could work on a budget that would take out the bits that they think are the most expendable, and not prescribe which bits to put back in. I mean, obviously they heard all the same feedback that we heard. But if you have sort of a numeric guidance as to say, if you could only increase it by 6%, we might be able to stomach that. Or if you could only increase it by something, then that might be a percentage that we could deal with. But without any guidance, then we're still sort of swinging in the wind.
Right. Okay, Becky.
Anna, I was just wondering, and I apologize if you already answered this question, because Zoom decided to update in the middle of the beginning of the meeting, so
Oh no.
I crashed. My question is this the final budget from the school committee? Are you statutorily out of time, and this is it? This is all the towns will see?
So we have to put this to the towns in order for it to be able to be on the warrant and to give proper notification. We could not have any more meetings on this. What that means is we have now notified you, this is our budget. Any further changes would have to be at the discretion of the moderator, I guess. And so if we were to come to a different budget between now and then, we could still give it to you or could still be proposed at a certain time. My understanding is, I think AJ said that the warrant has to be made 10 days before, 2 weeks before the town meeting. So it's not clear to me exactly which modifications can be made and when they can be made and who decides whether they can be made. But from the school committee standpoint, this vote had to be passed in order to be in compliance with the state.
Okay, so it is your
and
final statutory required budget.
yes.
So
we
any
can still
other
make
changes-
amendments, but this is the budget.
So any changes would have to be handled on town meeting floor with 3 towns and through the council for Amherst. Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that because there aren't many options here then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we are definitely going to Amherst College as soon as possible, and we will try to raise some additional funds from, in other ways. And how that would play out and how that would affect future budgets is unclear. So, that's all we can promise right now.
And the last
So-
question, could I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, go
Nate?
ahead, Becky.
So the method presented that says 100% statutory, does that include the rolling average? And is that the method we've used for the last 3 years?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the method. So what happens, this is very confusing to me, but the way that previous budgets have been developed is you have a level services budget. And then Amherst tells everybody, well, we can only afford X percentage increase this year.
Right.
And so then they are given 4% and their amount of money is taken out of the budget. Then the allocations happen based on that amount of the budget. And then the guardrails are put into place, which I think is a little convoluted, but I'm new to the game. So this is how it's apparently always
Well,
been done.
Well, the method, we just so, and I'm sure you're aware, we fought for 10 years to get to this method. Because there was never any acknowledgement of the disparities between, the average incomes in the communities, which are astronomically different.
Yeah.
And
The
so.
formula itself
it's-
is very, has been negotiated over many years. The way they apply the formula to me is a little confusing because they don't apply the formula until after they've discovered how much Amherst can pay. And then
And
they apply the formula and then they further reduce the
They
budget.
walk into
based
it
on-
backwards.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a little
exactly.
backwards. But that's my understanding of how the normal budget process goes.
Right.
AJ,
you.
if you have a different perception, then please correct me. Okay.
No, that's right. And, it's like, it's usually a kind of a 2-step process because Amherst says we can, we'll give you this guidance. And then they come back a month later and say, well, actually, we'll give you another % or whatever. And so then what you described then gets reworked to accommodate, what they're able to absorb. But
Isn't
I think
that,
you're-
is that
you're-
guidance come from the finance side of Amherst or is it the school committee?
No, it's their
Okay.
finance director.
Susie?
Just that little scenario that Anna mentioned, if we bring a reduced then below what the school committee is asking, if we bring that to town meeting and in fact town meeting rejects that and says, no, we want to take the whole budget in, it's going to drive a hole in our budget right there on town meeting floor. And I think what I read in the paper, it made me feel like the school committee doesn't really know what that looks like. And like Becky said, you got 4 towns trying to come up with something. And how would we plug that hole? What kind of mechanism? I don't want to know the answer tonight. I just want to say that it's very convoluted. It would get really difficult. And I'm not saying how people should vote at town meeting. I just feel like there's a lot of naivete going on, and we can sort of begin to look at that and say, yeah, so we suddenly have an $80,000 hole in our budget. Where are we going to find that money? And so, would we be in the April quarter of looking for an override? Would we close our meeting with a plan to have an override? I don't know. But I just think that this is way more messy than people are imagining. It's not just about votes. It's about making it work.
Yeah, that's a good point. Bob?
Yeah, I just want to say, somewhat reflecting what Susie just said, we can't come and say we're going to give you an additional 4% or 5% or whatever the percent is that we think we'd be willing to part with. We have to do this if we're going to stay within our assessment method, we have to know what Amherst is going to do, because after all, that's the big dog. They have most of the students, they have most of the expense. Whatever they do, if we follow our assessment method, then that determines what we pay based upon the overall budget, which is extrapolated from Amherst contribution. So that's how we've done it. That makes sense to me. And we don't know what Amherst is going to do. So we can't say we're going to give additional money, and Amherst isn't not the same level according to our assessment method, or Leverett isn't and Pelham isn't. No, Susie's right. We can't act independently. We act as a member of the region based upon an assessment method. And that means we as a regional towns, we agree together somehow what percentage of the school committee's request will be funded. And then we assess what we pay and bring that to town meeting. So we've already done that once, but now we have this new situation, and I think we need to know what the other towns think. I think we need another 4-town meeting immediately, but we need to know from Amherst what they're going to do. Ultimately, that's the determining factor. So have you heard anything, Becky, from Amherst or from Doug or?
No,
Okay.
I haven't asked though. I can reach out.
Okay, Becky?
So I'm sorry to be stuck on the assessment method, Anna. So it's the applying guardrails budget, the second blue column that the school committee has committed to. So, and you've committed to this new assessment formula that goes with it. So the towns could vote against the assessment formula and the budget. I mean, now we have two things that the towns can vote against, or for. But
That's
it's
true.
the 100% statutory, even though it's presented here, we have, because of your vote, we have no opportunity to work with that method. Is
So-
that your understanding, Anna?
So my understanding is the 100% statutory version. Yeah, so it's never really been done with 100% statutory, because you always apply the guardrails at a certain point so that no town has to have
No, we
an
didn't
increase.
always apply guardrails, I don't think. I think there was one year we didn't.
Okay, but the guardrails are set so that no town has to experience a more than 4% increase from the previous year. And so it's very convoluted. The
Yeah, 'cause
only
you
real
didn't- yeah.
difference is the guardrail limit in this particular case. The rest of the assessment was done according to the formula.
No, it's not. It's the guardrails. These are not,
It's
they
a
are not
convoluted
guardrails.
application of the guardrails. Yeah, I
But
get that.
but you don't have guardrails. All you did is use the same percentage for every town. There's no, because you have to start with the original formula, and the original.
So if
formula
you
is
start with the
cost.
100% statutory amount.
Yeah.
And then you apply the guardrails and you gradually lower the guardrail until you hit 35 that or 23, 672, 918, then you end up with a guardrail set at 820. So what you've done is you've taken these 10%, 20%, 15%, 10%, and you've taken that guardrail and lowered it until you reach the amount in the budget that we need.
Right.
But this is
The
not-
I'm
problem,
not saying that that's the right way to
No.
do it. I'm just explaining that that's what was done.
Yeah,
So-
It's
Right.
just that it's no longer a guardrail.
I think
Right. I mean-
technically, I don't
well,
think it's,
I'll just say, yeah, go ahead, George.
no, you go.
Well, I was just going to say what's different about this is that in previous applications, right, we've had a situation where multiple towns are being assessed a value that corresponds to the 100% statutory method, right? And there may be one town or two towns that are deviating from that because they're hitting a guardrail, right? In this scenario, all four towns are hitting a guardrail, which means that the result actually has nothing, really effectively has nothing to do with 100% statutory. Like, I understand that in the process of getting there, there was the application of formulas that are modified statutory, but at the end of this process, the result is something that bears very little resemblance to modified statutory, because it's, we're just backing into a number and just applying the same percentage increase to all four towns. George?
So, technically, all right? So, well, first of all, technically, that's not the 100% method we're looking at. That's just the title that Doug has had on it, on all the
Right.
budgets he's ever presented. We know it's the modified method.
Yeah, it's 100% modified statutory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, technically, what is the school committee recommending? Are they recommending 24,428,14, or are they recommending 23,672? And that's really important.
23,672.
Ladder.
Okay, so if they're presenting 23,672, then technically, to pass this budget, we have to get the voters to agree to it in our budget, and the voters will also have to agree to a warrant article for the assessment method to be used in FY25. The way that is worded is you take the modified statutory method and you apply it to 23,672,918. If you have a guardrail, then if Shutesbury's number is over 820, then we go to the number we see on the screen. But that won't happen, because if you take 23,672,918 and apply it as that warrant defines the assessment, that guardrail comes in after that calculation. Here, if the budget proposal was 24,420 and the school committee approved that budget, and then they applied the method, just like they did here, then they could throw in the 820. That would be a correct calculation. But the way the wording is, I guarantee you, of the warrant article, you apply the assessment method to
That's a really good point, yeah.
23,672. So I think that's what's really going to happen here. And so technically speaking, right now, I think there's a conflict. And I think, a technicality, if you will. I seem to like that word right now. That's actually not why I raised my hand, though. But
Should we look at the wording of the warrant article that they?
It's right there.
So the proposed assessment is based on 100% of a 5-year average minimum contribution, with the remainder allocated for the regional agreement, but with guardrails of 8.2% on the maximum increase or decrease a town can. You know what? You're right, George. That implies that the 8.2% guardrail is being applied to
the 24
a
million.
budget of 23,672. It's not. It's
Well,
being
it's
applied
right.
on a sort of a fantasy number that is not actually being right. Do you
Right, so-
understand that point, Anna? I think he's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I'm
why
not-
I was asking.
I'm not
No, Becky,
100%
good call.
sure that if you applied, so let's just say that Amherst comes back and says, we can only afford an 8.2% increase. And so now you set the budget based on Amherst's ability to put in an 8.2% increase.
Right.
And then you set the guardrails at 8.2%. Would you not still come
Yep.
out to the same place?
No,
No,
No, you'd be in a different place.
no,
That's the point. Right.
because
So if you
Shutesbury
took
would not
a-
be going up the
I don't
same.
even know. So I don't even know how to do this math. So
Oh,
if you
nobody
took,
knows how to,
you
trust
took
me.
the 24,
Yeah.
420 number, and then you then put Amherst contribution at 8.2%, you are then left with what?
Yeah. I mean,
$350,000 that gets spread across the 3 towns.
but of course that it would also take some
Hmm.
from the other 3 towns as well. Yeah.
Yeah. But it should be based on the statutory methodology, not this methodology that
Right.
just came
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
But so,
Again,
Yeah.
but then
The,
would you not still
I
come
think
out to?
no, it would be
8.2 when
no, it would be different.
the allocation between the 4 towns would be different.
Yeah, I
Applying,
think,
go on.
but then do you have a sense of what the actual budget would be at the end of the day? If you
Well,
did
the
it that
budget
way?
would be the same. It would be 23,672. It's just that, well, I don't know, because Amherst's number would probably go up and they'd be stuck at 820, so you'd have to decrease it for that.
Right.
No,
Right.
it could be the same. You would just allocate the other 3 towns differently to get the additional $350,000.
Right, but Shutesbury's number would go down,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
means somebody
Most
else's
certainly-
would
it
go
certainly
up.
Pelham's would go
And the
up.
other
Stuck at
two, the other 2
8.2.
towns would go up.
Right, but
Yeah.
they can't because they're stuck at 8.2, so they'd have to take it out of the bottom line.
Yeah.
Right.
If
Yeah.
Shutesbury was the only one that had a decrease through that calculation, call it $20,000, everybody's at their max, we'd have to take 20,000 out of the 672.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think, in other words, Anna, what I think should have been done here is that Doug should have, instead of this column here, which really sort of is kind of interesting context, but it's not really relevant, right? Because nobody's actually proposing a budget of $24 million. What I think should have been here is the application of 100% modified statutory to a total assessment of 23,672,918.
Yes.
Yeah, so
And
if
then-
they did that, I did a quick back of the hand calculation on my calculator. So
Yeah.
that would reduce our contribution by about $17,500.
Right.
Um,
So then I think would have had to happen then is they would have either had to say, we're not doing any guardrails this year, or they'll have to set the guardrail at a different.
yeah, so
different
what would
percent.
happen if they applied the statutory distribution to this 23,672, Amherst's contribution would actually go down. And Pelham and Leverett's would go up, and Shutesbury's would go down.
Yeah.
And that would be somewhat untenable for at least Pelham, if not Leverett also, because they would then have an even higher than 8.2% increase. And they've already rejected the 8.2% increase.
Mhm.
And, to have Amherst's contribution go under 8.2% just then massively increases the amount that the other 3 towns have to support. So
Yeah.
any other method of doing this is gonna.
Right. I think you may be right, but I mean, separate and apart from that
Yeah.
potential is, I think you're going to have a problem with this language. I don't think this is technically incorrect. I think the language that you guys and Becky and George have pointed that, I completely missed it. But yeah, the way this suggests that this 8.2% guardrail is being applied after you've calculated each of our towns' assessments using the modified statutory method. But you haven't done that actually here, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's, when Doug was talking about how he did this, I was like trying to argue that this wasn't quite correct, but
Mhm.
I didn't argue it strongly enough, obviously. So, I can give him that feedback that this was not the correct method of applying guardrails and making a budget and applying the guardrails to come out with a budget that equaled 23,672.
Mhm.
That doesn't change the fact that this is what we got.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
don't know how we can change the motion.
Well,
Point, so I can
Can-
ask Doug that also, like, how do we change the motion to for the statutory method motion?
Anna, can I ask a question?
Yeah,
So the regional school, do they just vote the number 23,672 and the method, the current method with a new guardrail at 8.2? Is that what they voted? Or did they
Yes.
also vote these specific assessments to each town?
I think this is what they voted on, right?
Yeah, they voted that.
So it does
Okay.
have it has the assessments
Oh,
for
well,
each
there you
town.
go. Right. So then it is wrong. I mean, because the
Yeah.
first part is right.
Mhm.
The upper paragraph is actually, technically, that's how it works. They just changed 4 to 8.2. But it's this calculation below that's the issue. Because
Yeah.
they should take that method above and apply it to the 23, the smaller number on this page.
Yeah. Susie, sorry,
I'm not done.
your hand. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, George.
I'm sorry. So technically, just to make sure everybody is on the same page, when we talk about an override, we don't need an override to spend $127,000 more dollars. We have excess levy capacity over $600,000. The distinguishing point here is for a 2.5 override, we need 2/3 vote to approve a budget. But if we put this 127 in our budget and bring it to town meeting, it could pass with just the majority of the voters because we have the excess levy capacity to draw on. And technically, we, the finance committee, prepare the budget, we recommend a budget, we can put whatever number if we reject this today, we would put the $39,000 increase on our budget. But if we feel like the region may come back and ask us for more money, we could put something in there more than the 39. We don't have to. I'm not even suggesting that we do, but I'm just saying we could. So if we had an amount in our minds that we know we could support, we could put it in there. And if the region doesn't go for it, doesn't come up with another number and they stick with the original number, that's just excess money in our budget that we'll never spend. But if they do something, we got a little extra money set aside. I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying technically we could do that. Now I'm done.
Okay. Susie.
I think this is informative and fascinating, but I think what I like to think about is process. And I guess I imagine this finance office was pretty overwhelmed. And we know that, like Bob said, we're all co-joined in this process, and we don't know how other towns are doing it. So I think for process, even if this has to be a warrant article the way it is, we need a 4-town meeting. We need these numbers re-shown, and we need to have options in our minds. Shutesbury having excess levy capacity might be our way through this maze. It might not be the way for other people. So we need to hear from a 4-town meeting what kinds of ways people are looking at this to see if we can find a group solution based on each other, not just ourselves.
Right. Susie, if there was an opportunity to do another 4 towns meeting, are there other alternative budget scenarios that we would want to see explored at that meeting? I presented one, which was just, the last 4-town meeting budget plus restoring the language program at the middle school. I don't know if you or others have other, I understand it's like, it's a little bit backwards to be like talking about this now. We're just looking at the budget, but I kind of feel like time is of the essence. I don't know if there are other sort of budget scenarios that folks would want to see explored at a potential Four Towns meeting.
Well, we don't know
But
where our budget is truly at either. We are still working on our
Yeah.
budget, so I can't say
Yeah.
that we know. I think what you're right in saying we might choose some programs to support and leave that number in as the bottom line of the budget. But in terms of our big picture, we haven't gotten there yet.
Mhm. Okay, Bob.
Yeah, I just want to say, I agree. I think we need another four-town meeting, and we need to know what the other towns get together with those people. And I'd like to know, how does Amherst make this decision? What process goes on down there? Because that's crucial to this whole thing. And I would be happy, or not happy, but I think that it represents my point of view to say to the regional school committee, we don't support this 8.2% increase. We can't deal with it. Even though George says we can tap into the excess living capacity and support the numbers that are on the page here. I'm not going to support that. That's too much. And I don't really go for the excess levy capacity principle. I think it's a gimmick that is a workaround 2.5. So, we've already got a pretty tight budget. We've got a lot of pressure on our budget process, and we need to know more information really than right now to support this. I don't know what the process is down in Amherst. I don't know who gets to make the recommendation on these numbers, whether it's the finance director, there's a finance committee. When do they meet? When are they going to give us some indication of what they're inclined to do? Those are important things that we need to know before we can act on this, I think. So I'd say we send it back and say, we're not going to support this, just like Pelham did. And as far as us meddling in the process of what teachers they keep and which ones they hire, no, I'm more interested in how much money is it going to cost the town. It's their decision how to spend the money that we could allocate to them.
April.
So how about if I make a motion for the Finance Committee of Shutesbury to recommend that we have another four-town meeting before we make any final decisions on this budget? It's a thought.
All right. Let's see. Jim Walton.
Yeah, I was going to suggest a motion along the lines that we can't support this current budget. That we support a four-town meeting. That we support sticking to the previously approved and agreed upon four-town allocation methodology, meaning using the 100% statutory rolling average with the prior guardrail approach. So maybe not just downing this budget, but also proposing some changes to get us back on track together with the other three towns.
Okay. All right, I see a member of the public has their hand up. I'll entertain that. Elizabeth Fernandez O'Brien.
Thank you, AJ.
Sure.
As a retired teacher in the Amherst Public Schools and a resident of Shutesbury, the second part, I appreciate how hard it is for you to make decisions on the Finance Committee. I think you guys do a great job, and I really appreciate everyone's thoughtfulness and willingness to speak up about their opinions, because you carry a lot of experience with you. I would ask that you do what the principal asked the regional school committee to do. Talib Sadiq said to them, why aren't you being more proactive about the future? And that's the future, the present and the future that concerns me. And that's not just Amherst College, but you are the finance committee, and the school committee is a separate body, which I understand. However, none of us can stay in just our lane at this point, given the remark about how difficult it would be to raise the taxes on any resident. We need to be activists. And one of those is to actively support the regional school committee and going to not only Amherst College, but the university, Hampshire College, which we know is in financial straits, and other organizations, and asking them to support the education of these students. If one of these teachers is cut, here's a piece of it. This is my emotional response. There will be no safe space for LGBTQIA students to walk into in the morning. There will be no opportunity for them. And there's lots of mental health issues at this point, not just LGBTQIA. There will not be an opportunity for them to get anything beyond the overstretched guidance counselor's help. So these are the stories that are behind the requests to keep the finances at the new level that the regional school committee has voted on. It is not just a person who gets their job cut. And that person, by the way, does the same thing that the highway department does. They go from paying $1,500 in 2016 to paying $5,000 in the present year. Everyone has experienced inflation, and well beyond what teachers finally, after a year plus, were able to get increases in their salary. So once again, I really appreciate the hard work and the discussion that you've had this evening. And I ask you to please consider the people behind these issues and be activists. Go to this regional school committee and tell them they need to do more work. Maybe the local school committee person has to do more work, because we cannot fail our students. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, so I think Jim and April suggested that a motion that I think does a few things. One, it communicates formally to the regional school committee that the budget presented here we feel is not tenable for Shutesbury. Recommends an additional 4 towns meetings so that we can collaboratively work on a solution that balances the sort of financial concerns of towns and our commitment to students, and also provides some feedback about the assessment method that we've shared tonight. So I think if that's okay, I'll make that motion, kind of summing up what the two of you shared. Is that all right? Okay.
I
Is there a
second it.
second on that?
I second it.
Okay. All right, Susie seconds. Any other comment, or can we just proceed to a vote? All right, George.
It doesn't seem
Sorry,
practical.
George, did you have a comment?
Yes, can you hear me?
Mhm.
It doesn't seem practical to have another 4-town meeting. I don't see how it can be pulled off with the timeline. To me, this is more symbolic. I'm inclined to vote against it, but I will vote for it. But I just think it's, I agree that we should try, so I will vote for it, but it seems like it can't work.
Just because of the timing, you're saying?
Yeah, we're just, it's real time. I'd like to be able to tell the region how much more we think we can afford than the 39,000 that we're looking at already. To what extent can we go higher? But
Okay.
I think that's more important.
Susie?
I think that it's true our timeline is not working, but it informs us. If we go to the 4-town meeting and we even said then what we think we can afford, it may be too late for the warrant article, but it tells us when we go back to our town meeting and try to present things, it gives us more information. And we're not going to get the information unless we meet together to get it.
The reason I think it's impractical is because organizing a 4-town meeting takes weeks, and it's going to be the end of April before we can even have it.
Yeah. Okay, Jim?
You know, I also think what we're hearing here tonight and what we've heard from some of these 4 town meeting discussions or the school committee discussions is this is a critical issue. So if it really is that critical, then maybe we can find a way to get together
Yeah.
and solve a problem.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jim. And oh, sorry, April, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, if nothing, if even if it is symbolic, we're saying we're not just isolated, we are a region. That this, you know, that's part of the reason, yes.
So,
Yeah. And I'll just share one thing, and then I think we probably should proceed with the vote. But I think what it communicates is a desire to find a workable solution, compromise on our part. I'm not comfortable, and I'd be really upset if we just flat out said, we can't do this and we won't entertain any other option other than the budget that was presented to us in February. Like I'm not personally, I'm not comfortable with that. So I think this indicates a desire to kind of work on some alternative between this budget that we're looking at on the screen and the one that we saw in February. Okay, can we go ahead and vote?
yes, so Bob,
George,
Arvanitis, aye.
oh, Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Ashu, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Stein, I.
Walt and I,
Okay,
Looks like Anna.
motion passes
Can you just-
7-0. And then Anna, yep.
Can you just reread the motion one more time? So sorry.
Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have it written down, but I think I'll try to sum up. So unless you have it, Susie.
I
Try
have down the points are, this budget that we're looking at is not tenable. We want to have a 4-town meeting to discuss to be with other towns to discuss options, and we want the assessment method applied appropriately.
Okay, Anna, is that enough for you to
Yep, that's great.
to
That's
kind of
super helpful.
communicate back?
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, got it. Okay, all right, thanks everybody for, I think, a really good discussion, a hard one, for sure. But I think we needed to do that. Anna, keep in touch and let us know like what else. And I did want to offer one other option, or just one other thing. If Doug wanted to talk with us about our concerns about the way the assessment method is applied here and actually how it may technically be not incorrect, I would be happy to have a conversation with him. I might pull in George if he's
Sure,
willing to join
if
me.
I'm available.
Yeah, and if because I think we said a lot about assessment method, and I think Doug may want to sort of kind of hear in more detail what our concerns are, and I ought to include Becky in that conversation as well. Becky,
You're muted.
oh, are you muted?
If Doug were to agree, or the lawyers that helped him put it together, that the method was and needed to identify the 23 million, not the 24 in the article, that amendment could be made on the floor by the regional reps at all 4 towns, potentially, or however Amherst would have to do it. But I think if we could identify if there is a problem and get it corrected, that would benefit everybody.
Okay. All right, Anna, thanks for spending time with us. I know you
Yep.
spent a
Thanks
lot of
for
time
having me.
in school meetings, so yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay. Oh boy, it's 8:30 and I'm
We
gonna
are
pull up.
again.
Yep. So I think what we should do is well, Bob, I see your hand up.
I was just gonna ask you, AJ, if it's practical for us to have another meeting handle some of the other things on our agenda, I'd be happy to do that. But
Yeah.
I'm not happy I get all tired out, tuckered out with these long
Yeah.
meetings, and I want my mind to be sparkling and fresh.
We haven't
I
even
think that's a
adopted
really
budget
good,
yet.
I know, I think that's a really good suggestion. I mean, I know I hope you guys don't mind how much time we spent on the region. I just felt like it was critical to get her our full kind of feedback. So I think what we could do is add a meeting for next week. Becky, what would our options be? I know select board's probably meeting on Tuesday night. So what would our options be for if we added a meeting for next week? Could we do Wednesday?
Yes. I believe Wednesday, I'm having my 2 Wednesday meetings this week, so next Wednesday is wide open for me and my Zoom is available.
Okay. So Wednesday, the 27th. Okay, George's thumbs up. Anybody not available for that?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. So I think I'm glad you suggested that, Bob. Let's plan on adding a meeting to our schedule for Wednesday, March 27th. Okay, at 6:30. Okay, and so what do we want to do at that meeting? We still have to look at the budget that Becky shared with us earlier today. I think we also need to review funding of capital projects that have been approved by capital planning,
Yeah.
right? Do we have any capacity to do either of those things tonight, or are people kind of spent and we just want to tackle that next Wednesday?
Next
That'd be my
Wednesday.
vote. That'd be my vote.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
don't add
got it.
anything else,
All
Becky,
right.
please, okay?
I mean,
Don't add any more.
the fire chief never showed
Although-
up. That'd have been the only critical
Yeah.
thing.
Can I
Yeah.
speak to the fire chief situation?
Please go ahead, Becky.
So he's
Yeah.
letting you know, and he might, and I will check in with him if he's down to 0, but the fire, so we have money available in the call response. There's a $10,000 balance. He has $1,500 left in the training salaries. He's gonna run out, but if he does it, I mean, if we can hold out to May 1st, the select board and finance committee could do a line-to-line transfer from the call wages. So in the end, I think we can avoid a FinCom transfer.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. Yeah.
Great.
Okay,
So
great.
FinCom reserve is just over 55,000. So for the next time we get a request, everybody just keep that number in your mind.
Thanks.
Okay.
A request
All right,
before
great.
next meeting. Becky,
Please.
the budget you sent today, would you be able to set it back to the 39,000 increase at the regional level and redistribute it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Can I add, I know Bob, you said let's not add anything. I do think on Wednesday, we should have a discussion about what we might be able to contribute or recommend contributing to the regional school budget above the 39. As you know, if for no other reason than as a step to sort of help us plan if there is another 4-town meeting. I think it would be useful for us to have had a conversation that says, well, you know, we said that we couldn't afford the full budget that came to us tonight, but we think we can potentially find you know, some additional funds above and beyond the 39,000. I think we should have that discussion. Bob.
Yeah, just on that point, I think it'd be really useful from my point of view, if you did have that conversation with Doug and we got some more information about Amherst and what they're likely to do
Yeah.
with this, because that is a crucial thing as far as I'm concerned. You know, that just gives us some basis to understand what the playing field is, you know? Really,
Yeah.
So if you could do that, that'd be great. If you could bring that to the meeting or let us know, that would be
Yeah.
very useful in that regard.
Okay, so yeah, if I don't hear an update from Anna, I'll reach out to Doug and ask him about both questions, like, can we have a conversation about assessment method, and two, has there been any feedback from Leverett and Amherst? Okay, Susie.
So are we assuming that our conversation tonight, Anna is going to be the person who brings it down to Doug as soon as possible? Or should I send him a draft minute tomorrow so that if there is any movement towards a Fort town meeting, it starts to gel?
Might as well hit them from both directions.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I know Anna's is definitely, I don't know if she's speaking directly, I mean, she's reporting back to the regional school committee. I assume she'll include Doug in that communication, but yeah, I think as Bob said, we can, that doesn't preclude us from sending that as well. Becky.
I was just thinking, I could call Sean Mangano and see what I can learn from him. And
Yeah.
maybe Andy Steinberg if Sean directs me that way, but hopefully Sean will have the info.
John's still in Amherst? I thought he left Amherst.
Oh, shoot, that's right.
He's down in Hoyoke school system.
That's right.
Call him up and ask him.
Yeah.
I'll call and ask him.
He's a good resource on funding.
Yeah.
He's been paying attention, I can
George.
tell you.
I know him, he's not. He's focused on where he is. I'm sure he's busy in Hoyoke.
Yeah.
But I'll call Andy.
All right.
We can do the
Okay.
minutes.
Yeah, let's do that. We've been hunting on these February minutes for a little while, so we could just do that. Let's do that and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so we've got the draft minutes from February 6th that we asked Susie to make some changes to. So let me pull those up.
March 6th?
No, first.
February 6th.
February
Would it be-
6th.
Okay.
February
We
6th.
punted on these in the last meeting.
I
Yeah,
forgot to give
and
you
I-
the redrafted ones.
Right. Susie, is there a way to direct me to the section that we updated? I'm trying to remember now.
We changed A1, A1A, we changed little b to state mandated costs of 90K.
Okay.
We didn't identify something else. And that was really the only significant change.
Okay.
Motion we accept these as-
So, yeah, George just made a motion to approve these minutes as amended. Jim Hemingway?
Yeah, Susie, could, in A1A, could you just delete the word "the"? It would read a little bit better. There is a 40K the increase for, I believe what you're trying to say is there is a 40K increase for
Okay, yeah.
0.5.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Good to know.
I will second George's motion to approve these minutes as amended. Any other suggestions or questions? Okay, George,
Arnett side.
Groves out.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
I think April?
Stein eye. Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Walton, I.
Yep, they're falling asleep.
all right. Okay, February 6 minutes are approved, and now I'm gonna pull up. Let's see. The March 6th minutes. Okay. Has everybody had a chance to review these?
Yeah.
Bob?
Yeah, 3A, Susie, you have the highway department says A needs storage unit for small hand tools. It's really a storage unit for machinery and tools, not hand tools, but I would just say machinery and tools, that would
So,
cover.
wait a minute, when I'm looking through all of this, I need I need to reference where you are, so.
Oh, I said
what-
3A.
It's what
What
AJ had
page?
highlighted. It's right.
It's page, top of page 2,
Top of
the
page
first.
3A,
It's-
okay.
it's
So you don't
machinery,
want it to say
bullet there.
hand tools, you just want to say equipment?
equipment. Yeah,
Okay.
that would be okay. The other thing I noticed
Okay.
was C. The gravel, maybe you cover this later, further down, but the gravel road request was, we recommended it go to capital planning. Is that covered later in the minutes?
3C,
So, Bob,
It's
Yeah.
in 5A, 5C.
Yeah, it was covered.
Five-
Okay, okay, because that was B, no, excuse me, C, on part 3. Okay.
so we're saying using cash
Oh,
reserves
further
for
up on the
12K.
page where it was,
for-
I guess it was covered down there, that's what I thought, yeah, okay. Okay, that's it for me.
All right, Jim Hemingway?
Yes, I got a couple of things. Susie, there's 2 number 3s in part C. You might want to renumber those.
What page are you in?
Right there,
The
right?
top of
on
page 3.
Top of page 3.
See, you can look on the screen, but I'm trying to find my copy so I can put the edit in. So I'm not looking at the screen, but you want it
Well,
So,
to.
Yeah,
so if you
it's-
look at the top of page 3,
Yeah, I
it
see now.
starts with
This should
number
be
3. Yeah,
4,
okay.
Yeah, 4,
Five.
Yeah,
then
and
6,
then
7.
6,
and then that'll change
7.
everything else. Yeah.
8, 9, okay.
and
Jim?
yes, I got a few other things. On B2A, this has to do with the cruiser.
Yep,
The state.
All right, so this is
contract-
bottom of page 1. Yeah.
No, you're right there right now. Requested,
Yeah.
F-150, and you say the state contract figures 7. What is the state contract? Who's?
she said she went to get that number off the state contract something.
The
Maybe
state
Becky knows.
bid
Yeah.
list. It's the state bid list.
The state
list.
bid list. Okay,
Okay,
maybe
I'll
make
make
that a
that
little
say
clearer.
bid list.
I was confused by what that meant.
Yeah.
Bid list, okay.
And down below, section C, B,
Oh,
no, not that.
DB.
C6, I'm
What-
sorry,
what-
maybe it's, section B.
What page are you on?
Which number? Yeah.
It's number, can you scroll down a little bit, AJ?
Uh-huh.
Keep going down. There, right there. Could you clarify, Shutesbury currently ranks 176. Is that out of, this is confusing to me here. And that is a 50.9 what in the state? It just is.
Percentile rank. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I was, when I hit that, I thought that was a little confusing.
So
And
that
so-
is the 50.9 percentile in the state.
Yeah, and also the 351 should have been 347, because at the time, actually, let me take a quick look, but that schedule I sent you, there were still 6 towns, I believe it was. I can't remember now because one town has been recently added. But to get to the 50.9 is 176 divided into 347, I believe it was. I'm checking it.
Okay.
So just to be technically correct, need my
Okay.
word technical.
Mhm.
It's a technical night.
Technical
Yes.
foul, George, technical foul.
That's right. Yeah, it was 346.
346? Okay.
Yeah, it was 346. So,
All right.
and yeah, there's still 5 towns. There's one of them did since then report, but there's still 5 towns that haven't. I'll keep looking.
And Jim Hemingway sent me some possible edits, and it was good because he sent them in type so I can read them. Going back to page 1 and under the broadband review A,
Mhm.
number 1 should say, he would propose to say, some budget lines have been merged, making a more simplified budget per recommendation from accountant. So that's
Right.
one correction. Number two, it says increases in budget were for routine maintenance, insurance, colas for the manager and employees overhead to be announced, accountant and treasurer costs, extraordinary and unforeseen. I'm not sure why adding up to, so I have in there, I'm not sure what part is being edited. Is it to drop the rest of it? My draft says added up to 15,102. That's not in Jim's suggestion.
Jim, do you have any?
Well, I
Response to it?
asked Gail Huntress, I sent Gail, because there were some inaccuracies here, and Gail is very clear about the way she likes things worded, so I just forwarded that to Susie, because after all, Gail was the one who said all of this to begin with, and so I'm hoping that that what she wrote and sent to me, which I forwarded to Susie, would be satisfactory, or should be perhaps agreed upon. So
Well, I guess I need to work with her on it because, so I have in our notes, and unless she's disputing it, I feel like the FinCom looks at those numbers, which is added up to
Mhm.
15,102. And then the other one that she thought should be different, on number 3, I said the new cost of 5K for low income subscribers and the 7K administrative fee will be offset by federal grant revenues. And she just wanted number 3 to say a new budget line item of 5K for low income subscribers subsidy was added. I don't mind using the word subsidy, but what the FinCom kind of looks at is how things fit together. And so I guess I should talk to her, and we
we
can't.
could talk to her, but the low income that's completely up in the air, as I think that's what she was trying to say at the meeting. We don't know whether that $30 a month subsidy is going to be cut or not. And if it is, we also have to figure out whether we can replace that with something else. And that requires, it gets complicated. That's all I'm saying. So she sort of simplified it down to that one sentence, which at least to me makes sense based on what I know about what's going on the MLP.
Okay, well, I think what I'm gonna ask the group is to let me go back and talk to her because,
Sure.
and then I'll come with yet another re-edited set later.
And we can vote on this at our next meeting then.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Okay.
doing that, Susie.
Okay. All right. So we have a meeting for next week. Anything urgent that we need
Would you
to?
be able to send that document that you showed us regarding the region, the latest PDF that you had on the screen with all those calculations? I assume that Doug took the February meeting and just amended it.
Yeah. So I think I sent that
Yeah, we got it.
document.
Oh, I don't have, I'll look for it.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
apologize.
just see it. Yeah, if you can't find it, George, just shoot me an email. I'll send it to you.
When did you send it?
I sent it, let's see.
I got it. Okay, I
You got it?
apologize. I didn't realize it
Okay.
was attached.
No,
I missed that in
no
your
problem.
comments.
No, but actually, you just reminded me one thing I did want to mention is that that document does not include the cut in the capital plan for FY25 that Anna mentioned earlier in our discussion. So that document was the document that was posted in advance of their last meeting, and they actually discussed making that cut in the capital plan during the meeting. So I don't actually have the updated capital plan from them. So just so you know, if you're looking at that section. Yeah.
Is that another thing that Anna needs to send to us?
Well,
We need to be in a
Yeah.
loop here. And I
Yeah.
don't think
Yeah.
she understands that yet.
Because if I don't get that update to the capital plan, which has happened a couple of times, my number's wrong in the budget.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So let me Yeah, let me, I'll be following up with her tomorrow, so I'll ask her to get that. Presumably Doug has revised that document, and so we ought to be able to ask for that.
She may not realize that Doug doesn't send it to us automatically, that we're viewing
Right.
her as the conduit. We need to make sure she knows that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Steve used to send everything to me and I'd get it out to the committee right when I got it. It was really helpful.
Yep, okay, I'll
So
mention that too.
can we bring the long goodbye to it?
Right,
Make a
I assume
motion.
that's a motion to retire.
I'll second that.
All right.
Only
George?
only two items at our next meeting, though.
Yeah, really small ones, right? Not even,
Yeah, really, almost
Piece of cake.
insignificant. Yeah, piece of cake. Yeah.
Piece of cake.
All right, everybody have peace until
No,
then.
you have to vote.
Guys,
Oh,
have
when
the
I
vote to
say-
adjourn and then I'll
Oh,
shut you
sorry.
down like.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew eye.
Close your eye.
John,
Walt and I, that was too fast.
Night all.
John.
Good night.
All right.
Have a good
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Yeah.
All right, take care.
Thank you.